So the first step in installing a Savur Rod Float is you have to remove the handle material. It can be EVA foam, cork, carbon fiber sometimes. Really doesn't matter. That has to come off. We have to get to the rod blank. These little trim rings, you just snip right through them with a pair of side cutters and bend them out of the way, and you're done. Okay, to actually remove the EVA foam or the cork, you're going to start from the trim ring and just make 4 or 5 cuts around the rod blank. The easiest way to get this material off from here is just to use a pair of pliers and just grab the EVA foam or the cork, whatever the material is. You're never grabbing the rod blank at all with the pliers. And this is what it should look like when you're done removing the material. It's good enough for right now. This big piece in the end is a counterweight, and I'll show you how to tackle that in a minute. I'm also going to install a Savur full handle as a split grip. Some people like to do these fighting butt styles and not add the length that a Savur split grip would have. So same process, same everything. Okay, so the next step is to get the length of the exposed rod blank to the correct length. For split grip rods, the length you need to have from the trim ring is 1 7/8 inches. And I'm just going to make a nick in it right here with my utility knife. And for the full handles, you need 1 3/8 inches exposed rod blank, which is about perfect. All right, guys, the next thing we have to do is we have to trim the rod blank if needed. So the best tool to use for this is actually a Dremel with a metal cutting wheel on it. Remember, this rod has that counterweight in it. You don't want to cut all the way through the counterweight. Just cut around the circumference of the rod and then try to pull the counterweight out. If it doesn't pull out, add a little bit of heat to the cut end and it'll start to wiggle out. And just to show you how much counterweight some of these companies use, the counterweights weigh almost the same thing as the Savur does. The next thing we have to do is make sure that there is a clear pathway for the center screw of the Savur to protrude into the rod blank a little bit. The one we just cut the counterweight off of is fine, and the other rod actually has a glue plug in it. And all you do to get through that, you don't need to dig all that out. Just use a 3/16 drill bit and drill right through it. See how there's quite a bit of play in this full handle rod float that we're doing. You don't really want to use epoxy to take that space up. And just the opposite on the split grip body, I left enough of the old handle material on there to kind of give us a base, and it fits about perfect. Now to take the space up in the one that has a lot of play in it, you want to use the cheapest white masking tape you can find. And you start in the middle and you just start making rounds around it. Now see how I've got a little bit of rod blank exposed in front of the tape and behind the tape? That's exactly what you want. And this takes a little bit of trial and error to get the right size, but you can put a little on, take a little off until you get it exactly right. You want the rod float to not fall off when you hold it straight up and down with the tape on there. Okay, now it's time to just kind of clean up. You probably got a little bit of a mess, but the next things you want to get ready are your epoxy. Uh, your masking tape has no business being here. I don't even know I have that in the shot. Some rubbing alcohol, a dry and a wet napkin, and I just use, if I were you guys, I would just use your Savur uh, packaging insert to mix your glue, mix your epoxy, I mean. Now, I'm not going to use a Savur packaging insert because those things cost me money. But the next thing you do, cut both of the packets open on your epoxy, there's a hardener and a resin. Mix them together until they become a white paste. So now it's time to apply the epoxy. Just use a popsicle stick that we sent you and grab a little bit of it with the popsicle stick and start smearing it around the rod blank, the exposed rod blank. Get it all over the tape, get it all over the exposed rod blank. And this is why we have you use the cheapest white tape we can find, because it's porous and it will absorb some of that epoxy. So just get it on there, and as you start to put the rod float on, turn it as you're pushing it on. You'll see that epoxy smear. You want a nice little wave pushing up against the trim ring there. And as I get it up to where it needs to sit, I keep turning it a little bit, and just to keep the epoxy moving around in there. And before you set it down, get your initial lineup. So the Savur logo goes real side on every rod. So on casting rods, it'll be on the top. You'll be looking at it when you look down, and just the opposite for spinning rods. It'll be not facing you. We want that. We want the vent hole when the rod falls in the water to be on top. Now I'm going to start with my dry paper cloth, and I'm going to just clean up the excess epoxy that's squeezed out as we were pushing up. And I'm also going to get down on the crevice of the full handle. So the final step is to get your other clean paper towel out and just dump some rubbing alcohol on it. It is, as long as the epoxy is wet, it cleans up really easy. It'll leave a really nice, clean install for you. And then finally, get your alignment strict. Get your Savur logo lined up with the real seat on the rod. And then stand it up without a reel on it for about 2 to 3 hours is really all it takes. So